Joel Bitonio talks Brown's identity, Shaduer Sanders, and something called a quarterback derby, and NFL rule changes. Now on the React. Welcome to the OBR streaming network. This is the React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Good to see you here joining us tonight. Make sure you hit that like button. Just takes a second, and subscribe as you come in to the chat or out if you're over on Twitter and you want to get involved in the conversation. Hop on over to the Orange and Brown report at YouTube, youtube.com/Orange and Brown report. Sorry about that. And join us over here at YouTube and make sure you subscribe. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. We have a nice show prepared for you. What's going on, Pete?
What's going on? Hey, Shaduer Sanders signed. That's pretty good. And then for some reason, we've decided that we're talking about Deshaun Watson again. I still can't figure out who this is for.
What do you mean by who this is for?
So, I operate in a world that functions on incentives. The incentive for Deshaun Watson to play football, either because he's going to help you win football games or because there's some other benefit to him being anywhere near your football team. So as the Browns have sort of limped or are still in the process of limping out of the Deshaun Watson era, and every possible mention of Watson is sort of a reminder why, or an argument for firing Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, there's no incentive to sit there and go, well, what if this thing's finally going to work after now his second, what would be his re-ruptured Achilles tendon and awful play and being an awful teammate and being a horrible nightmare. But what if it's going to work now? Like this is not a world that makes any sense. So it's not coming from the team. It's not coming from players. The only person that can possibly benefit is Deshaun Watson. And even that requires a certain amount of delusion on his part, which he's never been a stranger to. But what do you think is going to happen? You're going to somehow get out of Cleveland and sign with another NFL team? There's no one could possibly want Deshaun Watson at this point. I don't know if the UFL would want Deshaun Watson at this point. He cannot play, and he's an absolute nightmare. And just if you want to bring down people who watch this team in the fastest way possible, talk about Deshaun Watson. In watching sort of this team come out of the draft, or go through the whole draft process, and then come out of this, they get a bunch of new players, including 2 quarterbacks. There's a whole lot of energy and excitement, even if it's sort of this weird contrived sort of thing that who's going to really be the starter and all this other stuff. Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shaduer Sanders. People are at least engaged and interested in that scenario. And a lot of that is because of Shaduer Sanders. He's certainly one of the most discussed players in college football from this last year, and certainly his draft experience and everything that went with that. And there are people who are really excited about Shaduer Sanders, or at least want to see what's going to happen with him. The idea that you're going to now reintroduce this element, which everybody has made peace with the fact that they're done with.
Yeah.
Hell, the owner came out and said they're done with it.
That's it. Yeah.
What are we doing? After the Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have been extremely polite and will always be polite. That's just who they are and how they're going to operate. They're not going to tear anyone down who's even not attached to the team anymore because it doesn't benefit them. But, and I'll give credit to Jimmy Haslam. He did the right thing and basically said, we're not doing this. Called it a big swing and a miss. Openly talked about the process of getting the next quarterback. They draft 2. They've got 2 first-round picks to potentially go get another one if they need to, which is the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
Who the hell? What's the upside here? But like,
there's 4 guys there already.
Yeah, let's not even discuss the practical implications of bringing a 5th quarterback in here. I mean,
right.
Flacco, you say what you will, and you go, there's no future there. Okay, fine. You know what the upside is? People actually enjoy Joe Flacco.
Yes.
Find me the audience who's sitting there going, who are the people sitting there going, rabidly asking for, give me that Deshaun Watson update. I got to know how his rehab's going. Here's how excited the team is about Deshaun. Shaduer Sanders breathes, and they will send out a video, and I get 17 notifications of YouTube. Short, 7 shorts, full video discussing the breathing, all this other stuff. Deshaun Watson is putting out his own videos of his training in the Browns' brand new weight room facility, and the team is pretending like it does not exist, like he does not exist. They want no part of this, and we're like, well, there's still a chance he's going to play. The team, from coaches to players, would like to see him sent into space. They want no part of him. And it's not like people are actively despise him, though there are some that do. They're done. And if you're a player who's sitting there trying to earn it yourself, on the one hand, there's always this element of players like to see when players get paid. Right. And you can sit there and go, oh, that's great. They're sitting there happy that this guy got paid. Here's the problem. He got paid in a way which no one is happy about. He basically completely, and to his credit, I mean, more power to him. This is where I sort of wish he would just accept the fact that he won by getting the $250 million and just go away and be just like, I got one over on him. Great. But he won't do that. So now that money that he's getting now takes away from somebody else's ability to now earn that contract. So there is a reason for them to be contemptuous of him in terms of trying to work their ass off to get a contract that the team potentially can't afford to give them. There are players who are either not paid as well as they could be, or are not on this team anymore because Deshaun Watson is on this team. So, and as I've discussed before, like I absolutely hate the fact that when he re-injured his Achilles, that the next step is to make him rehab in Perea. Anywhere else, like the training facility he should be downgraded each time he injures himself, being an idiot or doing whatever. Like to the point where he is out on a raft in the Pacific rehabbing, but no one cares as long as he's out of sight, out of mind. Because the reality is, from most elements of the media and certainly the fan base, even though they can sort of acknowledge that he's going to still be here in some capacity for at least another calendar year, everybody would much rather pretend that he does not exist, and they're perfectly content to move on with that and try as best they can to be excited about everything else, or at least see what's going to happen. Be at least invested enough to see if they can figure this thing out. But to sit here and go, well, there's still a chance. It is literally Dumb and Dumber with this. And so you're saying there's still a chance, and the odds are even lower than that. I mean, the Browns are not interested in this at all. So I can only assume that this is coming from Deshaun's camp, and for reasons that I cannot fathom.
He thinks he's going to play again, obviously.
Which again, delusional. He is cooked. I mean, and he's had 2 ACLs. He's now the shoulder surgery. He's now done the Achilles, the same Achilles. He re-injured that again. He looked slow for the Browns. He couldn't read anything. And what is he going to come back and do? Like, he has gotten demonstrably worse. He was historically bad by the numbers last year. Like, there is nothing there for him or this team. So at that point, it is delusional. At this point, go be the franchise quarterback of your sandwich shop, because that is the only chance you are going to be a franchise quarterback of anything. It's just over. And again, you're going to be rich and all these other things. Just take it. That is ultimately what this was about. On some level, the money is certainly a big part of it. I understand that for Deshaun Watson, so much of this was trying to get his reputation back. It ain't never going to happen. Even if you are completely right and you are falsely accused and smeared and everything else, that could all be true. And everybody's still going to hate you because you couldn't play.
Right. So
I just don't know why we're still entertaining this when it's clearly not a reality.
Yeah, and go read Pete's article at theobr.com. It's fantastic on this topic, and as are all of his articles. He's a tremendous writer, and his stuff is always fantastic. So go over to theobr.com and check that out. I do, just to play devil's advocate, from his point of view, like, because from everybody else's point of view, like fans, I don't want anything to do with it. Nobody else wants anything to do with it. I don't want to see it. Just out of sight, out of mind. It's gone. Let's move forward. Let's stay positive. So I kind of blame, I blame Mary Kay a little bit. Like, well, why are we writing a feature article on this? Right. You know what I mean? And bringing this back into the spotlight. Anyways, it doesn't matter. She can do whatever she wants. She can write about whatever she wants, but I don't understand the purpose, because he's not going to play this year. I guess my question is, from his point of view, I guess he's just not quitting. Like, he could quit and go get married and live on an island and buy an island, do whatever he wants. He has all more money than God. He can do whatever he wants. It's fine. It's just, at the same time, I don't think he wants to give up. So what else can he do right now but rehab and try to get better at football? And what does Deshaun Watson's camp do? They put out IG videos of him doing everything he does in his life.
He's a fake hard worker. He works his ass off when it doesn't matter, because he didn't do it when he had the chance to do it in the summer. He didn't do it
which has come to light. Yeah,
working in the building when his teammates needed him to work, but he's working his ass off on rehab until he re-injures himself, and then he's not working his ass off. And but we're going to show him, doing the rope in a boot. Like, it is the most contrived crap. It looks ridiculous. To watch this man try to fake it, and I don't care if if he means it this time or whatever. When his teammates, and this is part of the problem, his teammates, there are people that absolutely despise him because of the way he handled himself. There are coaches that lost their jobs because of him. The direction of the organization had to be changed to cater to him. If Jason Lloyd did his article in the Athletic talking about how they had to coddle him.
Yeah,
enough. It's fake. He is fake. Everything about this is fake.
Yeah.
So I'm not interested. And if I have, but let's talk solutions. If you're the Browns, how do you handle this? I got two options. One, until the Browns start construction on all of this land they've cleared out around the facility as they get ready to expand it, I would send Deshaun Watson to go practice by himself on one of those dirt lots while everybody else is practicing on the real field. That is where he can go get his individual work in. The hell anywhere else. Second thing I would do is, since the Browns are planning to go ahead without, at this point, they're at least posturing that they're going to go ahead without the county's support on their stadium project, I would put Deshaun Watson in a dunk booth every home game at the stadium and let people at $20, 3 balls. They will more than cover it without hesitation. They will never need they shouldn't need taxpayer money at that point. There will be so much demand to just continuously put this guy in the drink over and over again, to just take out all kinds of frustration. It would be a gesture for the mental health of Northeast Ohio, in addition to everything else. But other than that, and we discussed this because, like, Dylan Gabriel mentioned that, like, he's going to be in the meeting room, and Kevin Stefanski talked about it being in the meeting room. And it's like, there's this element of like the Browns are sort of like patting him on the head going, it's going to be okay, buddy. We're going to get you through this so we can get you the hell out. But like, we've gotten to this point where like, they are not taking him seriously, and yet he's doing this. And it would be fine if we all collectively agree to ignore him and just be like, yeah, he's going to do his thing over there, which is why, again, you go do your individual drills in this lot over here until they start paving it. And while the rest of the team does everything else, like it's just ridiculous that we are entertaining this as a real thing. Just constantly, all he does is serve to remind everyone of the biggest mistake, the biggest, just ridiculous, stupid gesture this team has made since 1946 when it's inception. They are looking to move on in a new direction. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry need to move on to get people to start looking at this as, where's this team going to go from here? If Deshaun Watson, and I don't think he is, but if you could somehow convince yourself that Deshaun Watson is somehow worth one more win than every other quarterback on that team, it's still not worth it.
No,
he's just not worth the trouble. So again, dunk tank, anything to get him out, just fire him into space. That is what all of us want, and not on a SpaceX rocket, one that actually is going to get to the destination, so he gets further away than he otherwise would. You have to be insane to continue to treat this with any sincerity, because everybody absolutely hates this, and it's like he is fan repellent.
Yeah,
you are desperately trying to make amends for what has been an absolute disgusting move by this team that has failed on every single level. The last thing you want to do is remind them of it. You want the fresh start. Whether any of these quarterbacks is really the answer or not, you want to sell people the idea that there's somewhere else to go. You are not interested in revisiting this nightmare.
So 2 things. James Porch in our chat has mentioned twice now. Then why is Jerry Jeudy? He keeps saying Woods, but it wasn't Woods. It was reported that it was David Bell, who is also rehabbing from a hip injury, which is why I think he's there. Why are they catching passes with him?
I hope for money.
Yeah, right.
I hope he's paying them in cash, because And look, he's there. This is the problem. This is what makes it frustrating that he's in the building. He's there.
Right.
It's
can't
them. They can get work. Now that's my biggest takeaway from all this. David Bell is apparently healthy enough to do stuff, which is good. That is the only good news I took away from this whole thing. But other than that, and I don't know how many passes they're catching based on what I saw from Deshaun Watson. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn when he was healthy. So
it's not like they're running routes. I saw he's just throwing to a guy standing there. So it's not really.
Then I hope he can at least hit that. But like, who cares? Like that part, I don't care. If he can stand in for a jugs machine, that can be his purpose. He can be a human jugs machine and save power. But I'm not worried about anyone else working with him to try to get work, because that at that point is transactional. He can sort of function in that capacity.
So the 2 other questions are PUP list then this year. This year he's going to be on the PUP list, right? You would assume.
Unclear. I mean, the thrust of this whole conversation comes at the fact that he's like allegedly ahead of schedule, and I don't know what that actually means relative to him being healthy enough to participate. But here again, the best case scenario for everybody involved is he goes on the PUP list, because then he has an excuse for why he's not sort of relegated to being inactive on game day and the 5th string quarterback, furthering his shame and embarrassment, versus I'm too hurt and I can focus on my rehab. And that may still be where this goes, but like, I guess we'll find out. Or maybe he hurts himself again. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing where like, that you get into sort of a legal and a CBA sort of issues with that I don't have the answers to. I don't know how healthy he is. I assume he's not, but at some point, like, we're gonna, they haven't put him on the PUP list. it would have been great if they sort of did the same thing with JOK, although, they wanted to give JOK his own sort of moment and not sort of like tarnish it by saying JOK and Deshaun Watson. But I assume at some point, I mean, if I would assume as soon as he has the green light, Andrew Berry's like, we're pupping you and you're shutting down as soon as possible. So, there must be a reason he cannot at this point.
That's what I thought. And going back to what you said before, I thought it was weird, and I mentioned it at the time, or on the other show. I don't know if it was with you or with Casey, but I mentioned at the time that I thought it was weird that Gabriel mentioned him and then Stefanski mentioned him. So you know what I mean, in the presser, and that maybe that's what led to this whole thing even coming up again, potentially, because they mentioned him as part of the QB room. There's no chance he's playing. It's just like he's lingering out there, and now you're going to shine a light on it, and that's just super annoying. We all just want him to go away. To your point, when and you said it earlier, what I thought you said in the article that made the most sense is like, it's like ass backwards. He gets hurt away from for a second time away from the facility, and now he has to come to the facility and be there all the time. It's like the opposite. You wish you could just stay away completely. So I don't know. I don't know how you handle this. The Browns have to be nice to him. They have to be cordial. You know what I mean? In some ways, I guess they don't have to, but to your point, that's kind of who they are. They're not going to just be a dick to him. But at the same time, he should never suit up again.
No, I mean, look, if you're nice to him, it at least eliminates the incentive for him to draw attention to the situation. He can sort of, because again, if he has deluded himself into some sort of comeback, he can't do everything he's already done, which is be terrible and get hurt, and then be a pain in the ass on top of it. Like there comes a point where you're running out of things you can possibly do to make the situation worse. So at the very least, there is upside to him being a good soldier in terms of just, not being a distraction. If that gets to, if there were a point where he actually becomes a distraction, he may quickly become their, international outreach ambassador to Nigeria.
Yeah, seriously. That's a great idea. But so the other question then is this, because this can play out in two separate ways by my understanding with this contract. Say he does go on the PUP list this year. He doesn't play however it works out. You know what I mean? But next year, supposedly, he's going to be healthy, probably to some extent. He's going to be around. At that point, how do you handle it? Because you can cut him at that point and take the hit and post June 1st. But because he let them restructure it, you don't have to. You can let him sit on the roster another year, spread the money out more. Remember, the restructure was into 2027. So technically, I think they want to wait till 2027, and then they can spread the money out through 27 and 28. But that's another year of him lingering around. How do you handle? I mean, how does this work out?
I think the most likely outcome is they're going to get until next year, do one more restructure, and then get rid of him, unless he seriously injures himself somehow again, and then he can sort of be on the roster injured for another year. Because look, the cap hit is going to be low enough, and the salary cap is going to spike enough that I think they're just going to look. We just want him out of here. And if he's serious about however serious you want to take, I fake comeback, then he's going to want to get out at that point too, because then he's going to want his shot to go elsewhere. But I just don't. Unless he somehow gets hurt, and maybe he has look, if he wants to take up rock climbing or mountain climbing, great, good hobby for him. Skydiving, some sort of, parachuteless diving.
Yeah.
To the point where he gets injured again and they can, permanently pup him. I don't see another scenario where they are willing to sort of endure him around. I think they desperately want to be able to, write that press release and move on, and not because they don't want, again, this is not coming from the Cleveland Browns. They have no interest in this conversation. They have all this juice. They have this charismatic young rookie class. All these guys are great on camera. All these guys are really interesting to talk to. They've got, Kenny Pickett, whatever you think of him. They've got all these players they've brought in. That's where they want the focus to be. They don't want to have to deal with this again in terms of having to go through, another year where they're, I don't want to pick on Mary Kay because she's not the only person who brought this up, where somebody is saying, but what if the Browns aren't really, the door isn't quite closed yet, even though they've got the freaking welding torch out on the door. They want to be past this. And I think I think in 2026, they will be willing to sort of deal with, and it gets a whole lot easier if whether one of these young quarterbacks, one of the three quarterbacks they have on their roster is really good, or they draft a quarterback next year, because then you are now on a rookie deal. And I think that's the other part of this. I think the 2027 thing becomes more of a real thing and I don't know how this would happen. Yeah, I don't know how this would happen where the Browns somehow are so good that they manage to win a whole lot of games, and Jacksonville wins a whole lot of games, but also none of the quarterbacks on the roster are good enough to sort of maintain. Like that would be that would be the weird Kenny Pickett balls out like Sam Darnold, and they have to pay him, and then it sort of screws them. That's that very small thread the needle situation. I think the rookie contract is going to allow them to sort of eat that and just move on and be done with it.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because we saw what Sam Darnold got from 1 year of a what, 120 million or 110 million over 3 years or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 1 year. It's really a 1 year deal that could be three, but yes, I mean, the money he's getting this year is substantial
and real.
And look, there's from here, there's no quarterback that you're going to sit there and look at the market next year and go, we're waiting on him. Brock Purdy would have been that guy. He got his big extension. So, I mean, it's either if it's Kenny Pickett, it's a Justin Fields, it's a Daniel Jones. It's one of those guys having the breakout year and suddenly becoming the big free agent, except, with all of those teams, they would then have an incentive to, sign those guys to longer contracts.
Aren't they somewhat then in this quarterback competition? I'm going to call it a competition, not a derby. But in this quarterback competition, then to want the rookies to be the ones that step forward, because if it is Pickett and it totally blows my mind, and his tiny little hands find a way to lead this team to a bunch of wins, and he, reinvigorates his career, are the Browns, then they have to turn around and pay him like $25 million.
Right. I mean, look, the beggars can't be choosers in this situation. They're going to, if anyone can be great, they're going to happily sign up for it. But sure, there's no question that, if it can be Shaduer Sanders, if it can be Dylan Gabriel, and one of those guys can break out and be a great quarterback, they will take it. The Browns will happily take if all three quarterbacks break out. Like there's certainly not going to be a situation where they're going to sit there and go, no, we only want them to be great if they're the rookie. They'll live with the fact if Kenny Pickett can find a way to get meant tiny little hands firmly around the quarterback job, that they will happily sign up for it. But I mean, like that if that's the worst outcome they can come up with is, even a world where they were franchise him, they'll happily do it.
Yeah. The Browns are the ones that said no to his 5th-year option, right?
Yes, technically, but look, the league turned down his 5th-year option.
Okay. So it's all very interesting. Of course, beggars can't be choosers. If he's great, it's great, and they'll take him. I was just saying, like, it would be better for the team if it's one of the rookies.
Unquestionably. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, because look, that's where, that's the dream scenario where you suddenly, and people want to make the comparison and hope it turns into the 2012 Seahawks, or you could look at the 49ers with Brock Purdy. That's the dream. You suddenly go from a team that it's trying to like find their way past the Deshaun Watson debacle, and suddenly you are a team with a what you would then talk about as a franchise quarterback on a cheap rookie deal for a couple years, and have two first round picks like that. They go from nightmare scenario to catbird seat overnight.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, you're watching the React. Go read Pete's article at theobr.com and everybody else's stuff over there. If you're ever on Twitter, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. Hit like and subscribe. It only takes a second, and it helps us out a ton with the YouTube overlords. So help us out there with that, and we appreciate you watching and contributing to the show. All right, this morning, in what I thought was a very good interview, Joel Bitonio joined 92.3 The Fan. This is courtesy of 92.3 The Fan with Ken Carmen and Anthony Lima. But Bitonio talking about a number of things in the 2025 season. I have like 4 clips here. We'll play the first one and go from there. But it's a good interview. So we're going to watch that now here on the React. Let's, whoop, a little too small there. All right, let's try that.
As an offensive lineman and maybe taking on an identity that you guys had excelled at in the past?
Yeah, I think yes, O-line, what they're most excited for, it's that, you look up cut-ups in the offseason of like, the plays you're installing. It's such a refresh, you look at like, oh, this is, our outside zone left and all this stuff. And a lot of the plays, they flash back, 2020, 2021, 2022, like 2023. There's plays from, the last 4 years that we've been doing this. And it's like, all right, this is what we, not really signed up for, but as an O-lineman, this is what we signed up for. We're, going to run outside zone. We're to run the ball, cut guys on the backside, big play actions off these runs where the defense is tired. Like, that's what an O-line dreams of. And I came into this league, with Coach Shanahan running that offense. And so for me, it just feels like that feels right. That feels what, offensive football is. And so, especially linemen, man, I know it's a passing league. I know teams like to pass, but I loved it this year that a lot of the teams that were in the playoffs that were making these runs were really running the ball. Like even the Chiefs, the Bills, like the Bills in the playoffs had a drive with, 12, 13 runs in a row. Like teams that were, putting these smaller guys on the field to defend the pass, teams like, oh, we got to run the ball at these guys to make them tackle and see what they can do.
He is very specific there about full Stefanski, right? Even mentions outside zone, talks about the plays from 21, 22, 23, and that they're getting back to that, or at least that identity, the play action game, the run game. I thought, of course, they said what they said on their interviews out the door, right? That kind of alluded to that, to this.
Jack Conklin was pretty damn specific.
Yes.
On his way out the door last year.
Yeah. But once again, he's here being very specific about going back to what they did before. What do you think about that?
Well, look, when you don't know who your quarterback's going to be, everything about this sort of lends itself to running the ball more. The draft is more about being tougher. You take a defensive tackle first. You get a linebacker second. You take 2 running backs. Your closest thing to an offensive weapon that catches the ball is 240 pounds.
Yeah.
They want to get back to being a more physical football team. They hired an offensive line coach whose roots are in Stanford back when they were a road grading team that just physically mauled people.
Yeah.
All of these things are ways to help take pressure off the quarterback. And even when Kevin Stefanski got here, and obviously a lot of these things were in place, Baker Mayfield had the best season of his career in terms of efficiency of everything, but it was still based off of running the football, being able to control the clock. And you go back to the 2020 season, their 4-minute offense was outstanding. The way they, you got to that point in the game, it was just over. They could just, shut it down because they could control the ball. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, just working through until the game was over, or game clinching touchdown. So now you have Quinshon Judkins, you have Dylan Sampson, you still have Jerome Ford. You have a lot of the same offensive linemen you've had. They've got to sort of reclaim a former versions of themselves, but you also added Cornelius Lucas and you added Tevin Jenkins. So you've got 7 guys who have had success in the NFL at some level. So it's just practical from that standpoint. I still fully expect they're going to have 6-man line at points during this year. I fully expect, we'll see who it is. I would expect Tevin Jenkins to be out there as a 6th guy at points and just mauling people. And it's going to look like Stanford. You got the extra tight end. You have David Njoku playing more to the role, to the style he was before, losing a little bit of weight, getting a little smaller. You're getting receivers, being sort of the perceived weakness outside of Jerry Jeudy. All of this just lends itself to that. And if you can get a quarterback to then succeed from there, and Kevin Stefanski, we sort of lose the fact that, between Deshaun Watson and then just this past season, that Kevin Stefanski's been really good at putting guys in positions to succeed. And I go back to 2020. It was Jarvis Landry. It was, Rashard Higgins. It was Kadarius Hodge. They didn't, Donovan Peoples-Jones. It wasn't like a star-studded cast of weapons. David Njoku, had his moments, but he wasn't like the fully fleshed out version. So like, even the Browns have more proven receivers now than they did back then. Now they've got more to prove this time around, other than Jerry Jeudy. But like the recipe is there. Now the schedule is going to be a lot tougher. But if you can do that, you can play good defense, shorten games, control the ball, keep it lower scoring, so you're not trying to score 40 to stay in games, then you give yourself a shot. You can steal the Steelers' identity. This is how they've won for years and years and years, where it's like 13-10. It's an absolute awful football game offensively to watch for 3.5 quarters. And then, they look heroic because they, it looks clutch when they've finally gotten their offense to do something after about umpteen tries, and they get it. And Kenny Pickett had a bunch of game-winning drives on that formula. So
yeah,
is it going to, be some automatic playoff contending team? No, it's going to be really difficult. But like at the same time, I'm seeing people talk about 1-7. We'll see. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think that is part of what I think is motivating Kevin Stefanski and what they're doing. Is I think he's fired up to prove people wrong, that he hasn't sort of lost his fastball to get back to winning like that.
Yeah, I agree. When they talk about this identity, obviously I get excited too, because that's what we saw them be successful in. And you want, that's something that this fan base could really get behind, was that identity of being, kind of hard-nosed, tough, beat you up team with a really good defense and a tremendous run game. And why do you think Andrew Berry is so against bringing Nick Chubb back at this point?
So, one, Nick Chubb hasn't gotten much interest at all.
I know.
That's partly because when, Nick Chubb has not been happy with what he's been offered. He's not happy with his market. The Browns can offer the qualifying offer, which would count for them as $1.5 million on the cap. You would give Nick Chubb $3 million or something in that neighborhood. Nick Chubb has not been interested in that and is quote unquote betting on himself from that standpoint. The problem is, I saw the video that has been put out like either today or yesterday, and I sit there and I'm like, oh no, like it does. Like I'm hoping he proves me wrong, because I want Nick Chubb to be Nick Chubb again. And for his sake, I certainly would prefer it in Cleveland, but I would like him to be able to reclaim that. But what I saw, which was published, I saw a shell of himself in terms of the cuts and his weight transition and stuff. Like, it looked labored, and he's not wearing pads. He's not, and these other things. And obviously maybe it's slower, and they are putting this out and sort of looking at this as progress. Like, my reaction was terror. I just was sitting there. My heart sank a little bit because what I saw was a guy who did not look like the guy that we had that we've been accustomed to for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the same thing, and it wasn't great. I just think it would be valuable just to have him around even.
It would be valuable. It would be valuable. I think it would have been valuable like 2 months ago is part of the problem. Like, I think the value with Chubb detracts every day he's not signed, because so much of his value
would have been
for this team is like how hard he works. His lead by example approach, the fact that he's a guy who's, would be in there before anyone else and be like one of the last guys to leave. And when you're waiting potentially until what I would guess is going to be training camp, you don't get any of those things because you've lost essentially 4 months of what that would be. You don't get that sort of example for Judkins and Sampson and Ford's already seen it, but like, or the dude from Appalachian State they signed, you don't get that. I think that detracts from his value for the Browns outside of like for fans and the PR element of it. So that's part of it. I think, and I said this all along, I thought his bargaining power went down the second the draft happened, because all these teams, and the Browns took 2 running backs I advocated for them to do it. I didn't think they'd do it in the way they did it, but all these teams took running backs that they're excited about. It was a historic running back class. Yeah. And now you're sitting there as you're a guy who's coming off, the broken foot's not a big deal, but it's still the lingering effects of a catastrophic injury. And he is sort of positioning himself as an injury replacement, as opposed to somebody who's going to come in and be a franchise changing element. And I if he does end up signing somewhere, I think there's going to be an immediate temptation for a fan base to go, oh man, we're going to be great because we got Nick Chubb and the name is going to carry it for a little bit. But if he's just not that guy, then it's going to quickly turn into real disappointment.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I guess, the time to do it would have been a couple months ago, to your point. I agree with that. All right, let's get back to Bitonio here. Continuing to talk with the guys over on the morning show at 92.3.
Out what you think might be an identity for this football team in 2025, or is that something you'll try to figure out as you get closer to camp?
Well, no, being here at the off-season program, we actually went over what the offense identity, what the defensive identity, and what the special teams identity was yesterday in our team meeting. Which it's easy to put on paper, but we're trying to develop that as a group. And an offense, like I said, we want to be multiple. We want to, marriage of the run and pass. We want to be physical. We want to play fast, not necessarily like up tempo all the time, but break the huddle, get to the line, fast motions, all these things that an efficient offense does, and just not hurt ourselves. I mean, it stings because we've been very bad at it, but Kevin has always stressed, don't turn the ball over. Take the ball away on defense, don't turn the ball away on offense. And I think we want to do that this year. Like, we think we have the defensive players to play great defense. And if we can control the ball on offense and take advantage of those big plays when we have them, like, we think we can get back some of that magic, from 2023.
It's interesting stuff, just the way he's talking, and sat down in team meeting, went over identity, offense, defense, special teams. I mean, all that stuff is good to hear. But it's interesting. What are your thoughts on that stuff?
Everything with this Browns team's going to be third down, both sides of the ball. they are going to be successful if they can consistently have the offense in 3rd and 6 and less, and they're going to be consistently successful on defense if they can have the 3rd and 8 plus, because that allows them to do the things they want to do. That allows them to be able to run the ball, play action, just pass it, whatever. They have all those options. What they don't want to end up in is 3rd and long, where they are declared passing and trying to figure their way out. Likewise, they want to be able to dictate what the offense can do on any given situation. If it's 3rd and 12, the Browns are in a situation where they can put in Myles Garrett, Mike Hall, Malik Collins, and whichever edge rusher is going to sort of declare themselves as that 4th guy, and just pin their ears back and go. If they can consistently, like, that is their recipe for success. Being on schedule on both sides of the ball. So that's going to be critical. And that is something that killed them last year offensively. And when they had issues on defense, that was usually the problem they ran into when they couldn't make teams sort of operate offensively in a way that sort of allowed them to dictate and all those things. If they can dictate, they can be more like the 2023 defense. Whether it's going to reach the historic heights or not, they've got a ton of talent, particularly on that defensive line. Even though I still have one edge rusher, I would like this team to sort of figure out whatever. With Mason Graham and all these guys, they just have so many dudes at this point. And then, if they can just make it easier, where you're not asking the quarterback to sort of fix it in situations where the other team can pin their ears back, where you're now increasing the chances of turnovers. You're now asking them to be heroic and all these other things. And if those two things can work out, even if there's some variation throughout, and they're finishing drives with punts or field goal or, extra points, kicks, as opposed to turnovers, then they're going to be a much better team. And yes, they need to be able to create more turnovers as well. That is certainly something that has been an issue. Some of that is because, look, man coverage teams by nature are sort of less likely to cause interceptions, for example, at least by the guys who are in man. But we'll see what some of these other elements they've added. How much of that is fumbles being caused by the pass rush? How much of that is a guy like Carson Schwessinger being able to come in and be a big sort of boost to the passing defense and being able to sort of undercut things and some of that stuff? Or the safety change is going to be beneficial in a way that helps them cause turnover. But everything, as it always does with Jim Schwartz, is going to start with defensive front. How much pressure are you able to create, and does that sort of pressure break pipes?
Bitonio is talking there, and he mentions, he's like, we got to be better at not beating ourselves. And Kevin has preached that so much, but we've been so bad. And really, if you look back, penalties, playing clean, turnovers, they've never really been able to do that. I mean, in 2020, they overcame some turnovers, and even more so in 2023, I think they were a negative turnover, and they still overcame that. So, they've never really been great at that. If they could just stop beating themselves, it would be such a huge step in the right direction. I mean, so many games, even last year when they played well, it was like teams were just waiting for them to beat themselves at some point.
2020 is the cleanest football this team's ever played. Baker Mayfield was wildly efficient. Their defense wasn't great, but it was enough. That's their best year. But no, since then, Baker didn't play well in 2021. In 2021, then he got hurt. And then we've sort of gone to this spiral of quarterbacks who have been super volatile when it comes to football. I mean, Jacoby Brissett was the second best. That year was the second best in terms of not making huge mistakes. And they, that was the year that was sort of like the most like what they're trying to create this year.
Yeah.
It wasn't super high scoring. Like the Buccaneers game is a great example. They won it overtime.
Yep.
That was a complimentary football game where the Browns didn't score a ton of points. Their defense came through when they needed it, got big stops, and then they let Jacoby Brissett and Nick Chubb had the drive to win in overtime. I mean, that was of all things, the Anthony Schwartz game. But that's the type of, the effort they want to sort of get out of this team to sort of, the sum is, the total is greater than the sum of its parts type deal. That's what they desperately want to get to. Now, obviously they want to do a little bit better than that, but that was a team that went, what was it? 7-10 or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a little bit, I think, what they're trying to create. Obviously, I think that they have far more talent on defense, and then it's just a question of how much can you get out of the offense with that group.
Yeah. It'd go a long ways, though. All right, here we go. Another clip here with Bitonio.
What is the challenge for you? You've been through this before, leading a locker room with maybe different QBs competing for a job. You have different people, different ages, different walks of life who like different guys. How do you try to get that together?
Yeah, I mean, the hope is one guy comes out on top. You know what I mean? Like whoever that is comes out on top and takes the reign. The quarterback's such an important position. Whoever is named that starter, whenever it is, gets just the ultimate respect from the locker room, really, no matter what, because we know how important that position is. And truly the vets we have here, with Kenny and Joe, like they're such seasoned vets and just so like football guys that I think they're going to make it a lot easier to work with four quarterbacks. And Coach Stefanski's done a great job in the past of giving these opportunity periods to young quarterbacks and younger guys. If I'm Dylan or Shaduer, like I'm getting in Joe Flacco's back pocket and just being like, hey, like you've played, I don't know, 18 years in this league. Like, how do you make it work, and just trying to figure that stuff out. But like you said, it's going to be a competition. And I think the team wants the best guy on the field. And that's as simple as that. Like guys want to win. And so whoever the best guy ends up being, like he will kind of step into that leadership role and that leading role for the team. But I think it's going to be a fun competition. I think the guys are prepared to work. And from what I've seen, everybody's, picking up the playbook and trying to be, the best quarterback they can possibly be.
So he's talking about the quarterback competition, and I talked about this on Things I Think I Know a Lot. I think the guy, like a lot of who wins this quarterback battle, if it was going to be a young guy, it feels like, Pete, it's almost not like even the coach, it's like the team would almost like gravitate, like it'll happen naturally. If somebody can step forward, like you feel like they would have to command the respect and leadership of the veterans on this team, like Bitonio, the offensive line, like if Shaduer or Gabriel, but like it feels like it would have to happen naturally where like there was a respect there and people would see it in practice and then naturally gravitate towards him. And like the players will have a lot to do with this, I think, of who ends up starting for the Browns. Because you're going to have to win this locker room, I think.
I don't know. I think that part of it is intuitive. They're going to sort of naturally gravitate towards if they believe one of the younger guys is effective, they will naturally gravitate towards that person because there's probably going to be an inherent belief that they can get better. That is all obviously the thing that's going to limit Joe Flacco. I'm not sure how much upside there is at this point for Flacco. Like, for him, it's can he sustain? So that is where you could sort of get a sense of maybe there's some momentum in terms of like who players are excited about. But like you get into this weird thing where like, let's say one particular quarterback has a great rapport with Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Judy's going to love the guy who gets him the ball.
Right.
Where, if somebody might be better overall, but, doesn't target him endlessly, he might not be as happy. Now, ultimately, if they win more games, it's going to be happy. So on some level, yes, I think there's an intuitive element where the team's going to have a sense of who's the best guy. Like I would be, the guys who I'd want to talk to in terms of that aren't on offense. They're on defense. I'd want to know from the defensive guys, who's giving you the most problems? Who's the guy you sit in there go, man, he's just a nightmare to deal with. Especially because that is where the Browns should be a strength. They should have a really good defense. And if one of these younger guys, and I include Pickett in that, can be really effective and carve up the defense, that's going to tell us a lot. Now, the other part that's going to obviously give us a very strong, opportunity to see who's going to thrive and who's going to sort of take this thing is going to be those joint practices. And I don't want to suggest that, like, if one guy has a really strong joint practice against the Eagles, that they're the guy. But I do think that there's going to be a little bit of an element to sit there and look at, like, heavily weigh the joint practices both against the Eagles and the Panthers and say, well, when we got on the field and, we're competing in these periods against other defenses in a way that is highly competitive, where teams are using scheme, where teams are trying to win. How did that go? And I think that may give them a hat tip, but I'll be very, that will be interesting, is to sort of get a sense of the defensive attitude towards these quarterbacks as they really get going.
So you think it'll just kind of naturally happens? Because like I don't know what kind of leader as a professional Shaduer Sanders can be, or Dylan Gabriel can be, but like that has to be an aspect of this, right? Like, how much do they take charge of the offense? How much do they command respect from their receivers and things like that when they're trying to, like, correct somebody, or, you know what I mean? Like, take charge of this team? Or is that doesn't, you just think that happens naturally at some point?
I mean, this is assuming that if the perfect scenario is what Joel Bitonio laid out, which is somebody like seizes control and it makes it very apparent who's going to be. Now, still a great situation is that, like, especially those younger guys, they all get to a point of being pretty good, and that they feel good about these options that they have. But like, I think there's going to be an intuitive element in terms of, like, I think the vibe, so to speak, is going to be largely the offensive side, how the confidence they feel, breaking the huddle and all that stuff, and that element. But this is where I think in some ways the defense is sort of a antiseptic look at the offense, because they don't have that exposure. They'll interact and whatever, but I don't think they're going to have sort of a built-in sort of rooting for their friends type situation. I think they're going to have a little bit of more of a clear-eyed look. But like, it's difficult to tell. I mean, hopefully we're going to get a sense that, these guys are crushing it, if that's a possibility, and that it answers itself. But I think overall there's a little bit of an intuitive element, but we're going to see. I mean, the fact that you have 4 quarterbacks, or 5, if you believe the insanity, there's going to be a higher element of, you've got to come in and make the most of your reps. You've got to be good. You can't sit there and waste time with these practice reps, because there's, even though on one level the bar isn't as high, because this is an eminently winnable job for a good quarterback. On the other hand, you don't want to be 4th. So there is a little bit of a pressure to make sure you are ready to go when you get your reps, that you are prepared, that you are, you're not getting in the huddle and you're not embarrassing yourself to the point where you make it easier for them to be like, all right, we're down to 3. Like, because at some point the Browns are going to have to make that decision. I don't know when I'm sure Kevin Stefanski's sort of trying to figure that out.
Sooner the better.
Sure. And that's what, that only adds to the pressure that these quarterbacks have to become super prepared, especially if you're a rookie. And Kenny Pickett, these guys, Joe Flacco has a sense of how Kevin Stefanski operates and how the offense is going to operate. Even though Tommy Reese is different, some of the other elements are different, he has a good sense of how this thing's going to go. These other guys do not. And there's going to be, with that many guys in the room, there's going to be pressure for them to be really effective and make the most of those reps. So I'm hoping that sort of ups the level of effectiveness faster and gets these guys hitting the ground running a little bit quicker.
I guess my thing is, and it just kind of made me think of it when he was talking there, like, in the past couple of years, it has felt like this team, or a talking point around this team, has always been, there's no real like leaders that are players. You know what I mean? Like your best, it's hard for a defensive end to really be the leader is like the narrative, right? Or Myles Garrett isn't that kind of player. Who's the leader on offense in this? And it feels like there's like been like kind of a leadership void or a leadership issue on the player side. And it was always kind of like, oh, that'll naturally happen when they find their franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, like from that standpoint, it's going to sort of be self-evident. It's if one of those guys is good, like again, I'll use the Russell Wilson comparison. Russell Wilson, because that's the dream scenario. Russell Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round by the Seattle Seahawks. They signed Matt Flynn to be the starter. Matt Flynn had just played with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers were the Seahawks had signed him with every intention of him going to the season as their starter, and they drafted Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson, they had Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll's Mr. Competition to his credit, didn't close the door on anything, but Russell Wilson forced a competition because he was so prepared. He was so good. He made the most of his opportunities and basically made Matt Flynn a footnote. Like nobody remembers, most people don't remember who Matt Flynn is.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a Wally Pipp situation relative to Russell Wilson's career, where it's just like, oh yeah, Matt Flynn was the guy that Russell Wilson beat out before he went on what was looking to be a Hall of Fame career. You hope that somebody's that good, that they are going to be that obvious, that, in a situation where the Browns are openly saying, please, somebody come and take this job. The competition is completely open. None of these guys we're not married to anything. So we hope somebody can do that. That would be the best situation. Is that realistic? Difficult to say. I mean, it's certainly a possibility, but like only one way to find out. And, between what the 3 guys they brought in do well and how fast they can sort of improve on the fly, hopefully we're going to learn a lot, because this is where I'm not interested in getting to this stupid horse race relative to who's the best quarterback in freaking rookie minicamp. I want to know how much better these guys get in, by the time they get to the real minicamp at the, in the middle of June, how much better they look after they sort of went, the quote unquote summer vacation, which is really just them going home and doing more work.
Yeah.
Who's going to come into training camp ready to hit the ground running and get better? Like, I want to see those progress. I'm not interested about where they started. I want to see where the progress is made. I want to see where the development is made. I want to see who's ready to sort of really step up and become the leader of this football team.
Yeah. It should become evident at some point, right? Like naturally, or it should become clear at some point. If not, then you kind of run into this issue of, well, we got to make a decision. And I just think that if somebody there is like the guy that we're looking for, I think it'll happen sooner than later. Like, I think it'll become apparent like earlier on. I think it just naturally will rise, certain people will notice, and the team will gravitate towards them, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at, maybe. Yeah, I mean, hopefully. This is, I'm rooting for the situation to play itself out where we're like, boom, Dylan Gabriel is clearly the best guy out there, or Shaduer Sanders has corrected a whole lot of things, and he's taken another big step in terms of where he's going as a quarterback. And all it took was getting him an offensive line that could protect for him, and now he's going to sort of be unleashed. When you say like correct a bunch of things for Shaduer's game, I know that he has a flawed game. So I don't know who saw this video. There was I can't think of who. The Pivot or something. Somebody interviewed Bill Belichick, and he were talking about Tom Brady, and all the things he did well. And this is recent. This has been through his book tour. And the first thing Bill Belichick said that separated Tom Brady is his ability to keep the team on schedule and avoid negative plays. And as I've said all throughout this process, coaches hate negative plays. He harps on this: negative plays, negative plays, negative plays, negative plays, negative plays. Tom Brady kept us out of negative plays. That is the number one thing Shaduer Sanders cannot do in the NFL, and he did throughout his time in Colorado. And you can say the offensive line was a reason for this. I would argue a lot of it was on himself, and ultimately he put his team in situations where he was then
bailing them out on third and long and some of these other situations. But like there were a whole lot of possessions where, he's just ruining his. I mean, the most egregious example was against a pitiful Oklahoma State team.
Yeah,
they're in the red zone. They take
we watched
3 sacks in a row.
Yeah,
knocks the team out of field goal range in the process. And because they can't kick the field goal, they just call a Hail Mary and turn it over on downs. Like, that would be, if that were to happen in an NFL game, like that'd be it. Like that people would just write him off at that point. So he's got to fix that element of his game. That is the number one thing he cannot do in the NFL. Is he absolutely must find a way to correct and eliminate negative plays, because that's ultimately, to Bill Belichick's point about Tom Brady, he just avoided sacks. He avoided bad plays. He kept the team on schedule. That is where, Shaduer Sanders needs to develop more answers to situations. That is where I think Dillon Gabriel has a real advantage. Dillon Gabriel has a lot of answers to his game. That he finds issues. He beats the blitz. He's athletic enough to sort of, be able to mitigate some of the pass rush issues. The most famous example is they play Penn State, and he's able to use his speed and enough of an angle to get Abdul Carter, who's an absolute freak show, to be unable to keep him inside. Like, and Shaduer Sanders never going to be able to do that, but neither could Tom Brady. He's got to figure out the ways to sort of, deal with that, whether it's just getting the ball out to the right place, which is certainly the best way to go, or whatever it is, finding better ways to navigate the pocket, doing all these other things. That is the thing where I think Shaduer can improve the most. And if he can do those things, then suddenly he's going to be a very, very, very serious quarterback, to the point where that's the point you can start talking about him as a guy who can potentially lead a franchise. Okay. I look at Shaduer Sanders as a guy who has game-changing ability and potentially fatal flaws that will knock him out of the league in a couple of years if those issues aren't corrected. And yes, undoubtedly, again, I will say this, the offensive line was a huge problem at Colorado. They were awful, but he has to do things. He has to actively take this challenge on. He has to actively come up with ways to avoid this, because especially the way the Browns are currently constructed, they cannot be in 3rd and 15 because he took a bad sack. They are not built for it. Most NFL teams are not built for it, but certainly this iteration of the Browns is not built for it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that too has to be on the coaching as well. Sure, you've got to simplify this for, like, if one of these rookies is going to start, or at that, look like the guy, how do they make it easier for him? How do they give him easier answers to get over those hurdles? You know what I mean? And that's something I think Stefanski has been able to do in the past. I don't know if we've ever seen him do it with like a rookie. I guess DTR, but it's not a great example, I guess.
Steelers.
Yeah. Good point. All right. And all right. So you're watching the React. That's Pete Smith. I'm Brad Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Our next video is, I'm looking forward to talk about this a little bit. The NFL rule proposals as far as seating language in tush push. This is PFT, Mike Florio, Chris Sims. I think this seating thing is kind of interesting. We'll get into it here in a second, but let's play the video.
The Lions.
They're resubmitting their proposal, and they changed the language, but it's still the same damn thing. Now, they led us to believe in the aftermath of the league meetings in March, where the Lions first proposed the idea that, you get your playoff spot the normal way. Win the division or be one of the 3 teams who don't win the division with the best records in the conference, and you're the 7 who are in. But then we're going to determine the 1 through 7 seeding based on record and record only. I got the impression they were going to back off from that. There was enough said by Rich McKay and the commissioner and others that, okay, they're going to do something like, if you don't finish above 500, you don't get the home playoff game if you won the division. Or we're going to completely reseed based on record after the wild card round. Something like that. No. The Lions have resubmitted it exactly as it was. And someone told me, someone who was in the room, and there are plenty of people in the room for these things, the commissioner wants it. The commissioner was pushing it. The commissioner was getting a little pissy because it wasn't going the way he wanted. So the thing got tabled. Because it got tabled, because if they had voted, it would have gone down in flames, which would have been embarrassment for the commissioner. So, if it's back, right, the arms have either been pre-twisted or they're going to get twisted. They're going to get snapped like chicken wings.
You think this has got a legit chance? You think this has a legit
the
chance?
commissioner wants this one.
Man.
And I think I think we're at a point in the National Football League, even though you hear the commissioner say, well, the clubs vote and there's 20. He is the one, he is the prime mover. He is the one who wants these things to happen. And he has enough power and influence, and he's been doing it for 20 years now. He knows how to get through the maze. He knows who to go to get to yes, and he'll get to 24 of them. And
I know.
He wants this one. Because he thinks, and I don't know that this is right, he thinks it's going to make late season games more interesting.
I'm
and the
not
more
sure about
interesting the
that
late
either.
season games are, the more you can sell, like they do these one-offs now where, yeah, we have our existing relationships with NBC, CBS, Fox, and ESPN and Amazon, but hey, YouTube, you want a little something here in Week 18? Hey, Netflix, you want a little something here Week 18? The more interesting games you have at the end of the season, the more money you can get by breaking them off in a standalone spot.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. And listen, this is not something I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're going to change this and all that, right? Like, it's not one that I'm like totally incensed by or crazy, but I also I will say that I like the current formula and the way it is, and I do think you should be rewarded for winning your division. And sometimes divisions, again, are stronger than others and not as strong as others, and there's a lot of things that go into play here as far as the moving parts of that. That's where I do think there should be a award for winning your division that way. I think off of that, too, I'm surprised it's such a push because, like, and the fact that you think it could maybe be changed just because just listening to people at the owners' meeting, the people I know and talk to on a regular basis in the NFL, I feel like nobody was in really favor of this. It seems like it's totally being pushed by 345 Park Avenue here in the owner, and I don't know if it's necessarily best for football. We've talked about this a lot. First off, last year in the AFC, it wouldn't change one thing other than Houston would have been at the Chargers in that game in the wild card. It's the only game it would have changed, right? We've talked about before, oh no, how could they make Minnesota, they're so much better, go on the road against the Rams and actually at a neutral spot. Well, if they're so much better, they should win, or at least the game should be close. Oh, that's right. They got their asses whooped, and it wasn't even that close. So, again, like, there's so much that goes into that. And I don't know necessarily if I believe in the consequences you're talking about, where if you don't have a division, there's going to be more games that'll mean something or have stuff on the line, right? I don't know. Would that have changed anything last year? I don't think it would have changed one damn thing.
I just think it makes it different. You're still going to have people who have settled in to a seed, whether it's winning their division or in relation to whoever would be the number 3 team. I'm number 2, and I'm not going to fall, so I'm going to rest my starters Week 18. That's what this is all about.
But this goes back to the scheduling and the fairness of that. Then that has to change a little bit.
Exactly.
So this is not right.
The divisions don't matter anymore.
Right.
If we're going to do this, if you're going to be in straight competition across the board with the rest of the conference, then you should play everybody in the conference. It should be like the way college conferences used to be when they were small enough that you just played everybody in the conference, and whoever had the best record won the conference. That's the fairest way to do it. Why am I playing 5 games against the other conference if at the end of the day I'm going to be judged relative to how the other teams in my conference did? Those interconference games don't matter anymore. So in a 17-game season, I should be playing 15 games against the teams in my conference and 2 against the teams from the other conference. And forget about the 2 games again. Division rivalries don't matter anymore. They matter to win the division and get the guaranteed playoff spot. But really, how many years are you going to have a division winner who wouldn't be one of the top 7 teams in the conference. So you're still getting in if you're the best of 4 teams assigned to a division. This is, look, there are.
Well, that's where I got to go look. That's where I got to go a little more research on this. And like some of those years when it was the Seattle Seahawks and the Beastquake game when they were 7-9.
Would they have not even made it?
Would they have not? Was that 2011? What year was that?
Surely there have been years where remember the year that the Patriots didn't have Brady? They went 11-5. There's no way every division winner was better than 11-5 or as good as 11-5. So there have been years where teams have missed the playoffs with a record better than the team that won a division. So yeah, so never mind what I just said. This whole thing is going to be a mess. And there is a relationship to the tush push. They're going out.
All right, hold on. So first of all, I hate this. I hate this idea. It sounds like from there that this is like something what he's saying, and that something that the commissioner's pushing and isn't really being supported by anybody else except for him and who he can get to pass this as they come back with this. But I hate the idea of this. I love divisional football. Each division has its own identity. The rivalry games are what make the interdivisional games are kind of what make bigger games throughout the season. I understand they're trying to make more meaningful games like seeding wise at the end of the year, but I still don't think it's going to work out like that. And they're saying that the division won't matter anymore, but even if you did this, still winning the division gets you in. It's still an automatic bid. You can't win your division and not get in the playoffs. I looked at the language.
Right. So this is all about trying to eliminate dead games at the end of the year, where they,
right.
We've seen it when the Browns went to the playoffs in 2023. Their regular season finale against the Bengals meaningless because they couldn't change their seeding. They were locked into the 5th seed no matter what. They want to try to make more of those games count. I understand why they want to do this, but that doesn't mean I like the process. I think the division championship should matter. Why should it matter? I'm a Browns fan. This team hasn't won it since 1989. If they freaking win it and they're the 6th seed for it or whatever, then it would absolutely be, undermine the achievement. Like it would just be a waste of time. But I've got a solution. You know what the solution is? Play 16 games. This is the problem with expanding to 17. You create this issue. If you didn't have, if you weren't so endlessly greedy with the amount of games you want to play, and you're going to try to shove an 18th game and make this problem worse, this is the problem. 16 games never had this issue, ever. It was almost all, occasionally you would get an issue because, you would run into a team that had locked in the bye. That was the team that would sit their starters. It wasn't the entire field is basically locked up. And we're getting to the point where that week 18 has like one game that has playoff implications, and every other game that matters is for draft position. And trying to see which team's going to screw it up by winning. So
is that the difference in just one game, you think?
Yeah, like legitimately, how many games this past year do you remember with significant playoff implications?
No, I know the past
just the last week of the season, it felt like basically everybody was locked in.
Yeah,
and that is the whole thing they're trying to get eliminated. Now they're going to tell you that the division is going to be super important because we're going to save those divisional games for week 17 and 18, so they're going to be super important. But no, it's going to diminish the division. It's going to diminish the achievement. And you're still looking at just being one of the top 7 as opposed to trying to get to the top 4. So I absolutely hate this, and this is one of the many reasons I've hated 17 games. 16 was good, but this is what happens when you are constantly trying to squeeze every penny out of this league, and you're going to do it with 18 games, and you're going to have to come up with some other way to deal with this problem because it's going to come back up. Because records are going to get further lopsided, and you're going to have to find ways to gimmick up, your way to make those games to play more games, like to have more games with more impact. It's stupid. Play 16. You never had this problem. This is all, the NFL in many ways is the league that has a solution seeking a problem. They make things worse than they need to. And this is a natural endpoint of that. And by all accounts, this is not going to pass this year. We'll see if that changes and there's some unexpected change. That's not going to change this year. And look, until we get to a point where, networks are going to somehow bid less, they're going to eat it and take on the massive TV contracts and pay the NFL all kinds of money, even if we're getting what amounts to be garbage football at the end of the year. But for having gone through it, like last year, the Browns played a month of just garbage, meaningless football. Even if we were sitting there, like I tried to enjoy the defense because they played their asses off, but like games that had absolutely no impact. And every time they add something, another game, that you create the incentive structure to have even more meaningless football. And, you get into this whole draft lottery thing, and that has, people think this is going to solve the problem. It invites more people to tank. It invites more people to say, screw it. Yeah. My team's not doing well. I'm not going to get the number 1 pick in a normal year, but hell, I might as well get a few more ping pong balls because maybe I will get the number 1 pick in this world. So, this is a situation when the NFL comes up with ideas, or people come up with ideas that are ultimately going to dilute the league more than they think it is, and it's always to attract more TV ratings, try to attract more revenue from that standpoint, and they. Beyond the fact that beyond the not needing it thing, there's nothing to suggest this freight train is slowing down, just doing nothing. That's the part where the NFL tries to be proactive and sort of heading things off before their problems. But in this case, they are actually trying to do, risk more harm. And I can't help but think, because the NFL owners are smart, most of the NFL owners are smart enough to know that the networks are going to give them gobs of money no matter what, that they might as well keep the current structure. Because if you're a consistently good team that's in the playoffs, you want to be able to rest your starters. You want to take the pressure off and be able to sort of have the flexibility to rest injured players, to get healthy ahead of the postseason, to sort of get that break, because the season is so long. You need all the advantages you can in terms of rest.
Yeah, it's what's interesting is I didn't even think of that. You said that about the 16 games, but like there was more games when there were 16 games. There was like 2 or 3 games at the end of every year that were like win and get in. And since then there's been like 1, if that, a year. But you wouldn't think that just 1 additional game in the schedule would make that much of an impact, but clearly it has.
Look, I mean, it's the difference between 8-8 and 9-7, or 10-6 versus 9-7, is enormous compared to 10-7 versus 8. All the way down to 8-9. Like, there's such a you add a game, it just creates a chasm with such a small sample size that the NFL has. You don't have this so much. Like, you don't need to look very far. You look at the Major League Baseball or the NBA. Like, there are playoff races and these different elements, but they're not all that dramatic.
No,
because the disparity in wins and losses is so massive. With the NFL, one of the best things it has, and this is the same thing with college football. This is why you get the college football argument all the time, is because every game matters. There's this element of they all matter. Every time you add time you add a game, they matter a little less. This has been a huge battle on the college football element, but certainly you're seeing it increasingly take place in the NFL. And 17 games made it worse than it was. 18 games will make it impossibly bad. This is why they should have stuck with 16. 16 was the perfect number.
Yeah, this is a stupid idea. I hate this idea, this rule change idea. I also hate the tush push ban. I don't know how you feel about it. I was
Oh, I
looking
have
at the
thought.
language in it, but the language in it is ridiculous, Pete. It's like, okay, as a lot. All right, here's the article, the proposal, right? You cannot assist the runner in interlocking interference. No offensive player may push or pull a runner in any direction at any time. Are you kidding me? Or lift him to his feet. Use interlocking interference by grasping a teammate or by using his hands or arms to encircle the body of a teammate in an effort to block an opponent. Push or throw his body against a teammate to aid him in an attempt to obstruct an opponent or to recover a loose ball, or assist the runner except by individually blocking opponents for him. This is absurd. This is football. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, one, the rule, the language is bad, but my issue is more basic than that. I'm fine with getting rid of the tush push in the fact that I just think it's a awful play to watch and it's uninteresting. However, that only I'm only interested in getting rid of it the second everybody can do it, or enough teams that can do it, that it becomes just awful to watch across the board. You cannot
stop it.
You cannot take it away if the Eagles are the only team that can do it. That's where I have a problem. I need like 4 or 5 teams to be able to do this, to the point where we just say, now it's time to get rid of it. But I cannot punish one single team because they have something nobody can stop that to this point follows all the rules of football. They're just very, very good at it. You cannot punish excellence in that way. I hate watching it. I dread watching the Eagles games. I dread seeing the formation because I know what it's going to look like. It's going to look ugly. It's going to be, I don't like the fact that it feels automatic, even though that, again, that is a hat tip to them being so good at it. But I cannot then punish them because they're so good at it. Enough teams have to be good at it that everybody just gets sick, so disgusted by watching this play. Or, the other option is obviously somebody stops it. This eliminates it as a topic. But enough teams have to be so good at it that it just becomes an unstoppable play that virtually anybody can do it. And at that point, the league should step in and say, no, we can't have this anymore. Now, in that time, they need to come up with way better language for eliminating the rule than what has been proposed. The language they have is bad. It's ambiguous. And I hate anything that asks refs to make more decisions because they're really, really bad at it when they don't have specific language. And that can turn games over. And then we get into the whole, I hate listening to arguments about what is a catch. I certainly don't want to have arguments of what is a tush push. So figure out a way to stop it, or get enough teams that are really good at it that we just say, we're done with this. It's awful for the game, and we get out of it. But I cannot, in good conscience, say just to the Eagles, you are so good at this thing that we are taking it away from you when nobody else can do it.
Yeah, that's fair. My issue isn't even getting rid of the tush push, and I agree with your position on that completely. I don't like watching it either. And I agree with you that you can't take it away from just because one team is really good at it. But my concern is that what you're telling in this rule is like the single moment in the Browns 23 season where, they push the pile forward with, you know what I mean? In the Ravens game where they pushed the runner past the first down. And it was like this big moment where they were all pushing. Like you can't, it's basically the rules are saying you can't push your own player forward yards, which is a huge part of the game. That happens in piles all the time where you're like pushing your player to get past the first down.
Well, I mean, the old rule was you weren't allowed to push the ball carrier. You're allowed to push basically everybody else. So, the old Reggie Bush push rule was, or the way that to sort of get around it was like, you want to have your quarterback sneak, you'd have like the backs line up and push the guards, that type of deal. But yeah, I mean, this is where I don't like ambiguous language and like this whole thing. So the best case scenario, people figure out how to stop the Eagles from doing it, and we just eliminate it from the conversation. But failing that, enough teams have to be good at it to where you need to get very specific language on what this means to stop the tush push. Because if it's just being more physical than the other team and moving the ball in short yardage situations, then that's stupid and antithetical to the history of the game. So as it is, I hope that proposal is shot down. I have no reason to believe that teams are going to change their minds on this. And one of the things that, Mike Florio mentioned on some of this stuff is the commissioner wants it. No, owners don't care what the commissioner wants ever. They are the commissioner. The only thing he's there to do is eat up $44 million a year, $50 million or whatever he gets, to be a giant tomato can that takes punches from everybody, every critic, so that the owners don't have to. The idea that anyone cares what the commissioner wants is a gigantic load of crap.
Well, I mean, to his point, though, you think that if he wants to get something passed, he can, twist enough arms, incentivize enough guys to get to 24 votes at some point in time. I mean, he's gotten here with the games and all that. I know that's money in those guys' pocket, but that's
unless when he said commissioner, he means Jerry Jones. I don't believe him.
Okay.
Goodell just does not have the power. There are owners in the league that are effectively really the commissioner. That really are that guy. So if those owners are behind this, they are the ones who are going to be really twisting the arms. It's not going to be Goodell.
Yeah. So, I was going to post this a second ago, but Thomas said it perfectly. It sounds like a rule that could end up getting applied in really odd ways.
I mean, ambiguous rules and the refs in this league do not mix. Imagine going through a replay system with this thing.
Oh my God.
So no, I have no interest in the current wording of the rule.
How often do you see, I mean, it happens all the time where a running back is stopped and there's that dead period, and then your center runs up and pushes him for an extra 2 yards. That's going to become illegal. That's football. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. There's also a injury element to that where you don't want a situation where your guy is held up until basically 5 defenders can sort of run him over. There is an element where you are sort of being able to keep your guy up until the whistle is then blown is sort of the best case scenario for everybody in terms of, joints and everything else and piles and all that stuff.
Yeah. To the point about the actual tush push play, they're claiming that they're going to claim it's going to be for safety, but there's really no data that there's been any injuries surrounding the play.
Well, the safety argument is for the defensive guys.
Sure, but
the Chris Jones thing was a little bit scary for the NFL. When the Eagles did it against the Chiefs, and Chris Jones basically threw his back at the opponent and took a weird shot to his neck.
Yeah,
that had to resonate a little bit with the league because at that point, he is a player who's just desperately trying to find any way to stop this. That is where the health and safety comes into this thing. But realistically, they've just got to figure out some way to come up with defending it, or again, find enough teams that can do it. Figure it out that way, because eventually one of those two things is going to give, and it will sort itself out, and then you can come up with rules for it. But that I am not unsympathetic to that. Having watched that play, Chris Jones just trying to get down to the ground, and guys, basically ending up with their helmets into the back of his neck.
Yeah, because I think on defense, the rule is you can't push a defender, right? So, forward, you can't. I don't. So it's I guess it's kind of unfair in that way. Right? You can't run up and push your. Isn't that what they get called for all the time on field goals or whatever?
Yeah.
So, anyways, that makes it a little unfair. All right. Last thing we're going to do here tonight, we've got Garage Beers here in 20 minutes, so stick around for that. And Michael Keefe and the guys have have a drink with them. They would love for you to hang out. But yeah, so Mary Kay Cabot's other big article of the week was about the quarterback competition and her, basically speculating what the order would be for these quarterbacks. And we're going to go to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show for this, what they're calling a report. It's not really a report at all, but we'll get into that here momentarily.
Yesterday, we started today's show. First time in the history of UCSS.
Crazy.
We've done back-to-back WNBA topics. But let's dive into our first real topic of today's show after a quick word from FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing every night with OTAs. It's the first time we'll see the veterans and the rookies together on the field, and all eyes will be on the quarterback battle. Mary Kay Cabot of Cleveland.com wrote a column yesterday, more of a column than an official report, projecting how she believes the Browns will handle the snaps and the quarterback competition early on in camp. This is from Mary Kay Cabot's column last night. And I quote, "In terms of their batting order in team drills, it will likely be Pickett and Gabriel number 1 and number 2, and then Flacco and Sanders splitting the number 3 and number 4 reps at the outset, largely based on how and when they were acquired, i.e. the Browns set out to draft Gabriel in the 3rd round and passed on Sanders 6 times before trading up to get him in the 5th round. G, what do you make of Mary Kay's initial observation and best guess on how the Browns will split up camp, practices, and snaps?"
Well, listen, I'm so glad you tossed this my way.
I got you, G. You know I got you, bro. You know I got you.
I'm so glad you tossed that to me. And now listen, let me ask y'all a question. We're going to do this exercise together. We're going to do this. I like team group. What I like to do is break it down very slowly, line by line. Now, she says, accurately so, that they passed on Shaduer Sanders 5 times. She mentions that a lot. Do we all believe that they passed on Shaduer Sanders for personality things or physical ability?
I don't know.
What'd you say?
It's completely irrelevant. Like, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
it doesn't matter. I do agree with Bull's answer here that I think he says something to the effect that the first 2 rounds because of talent, and then after that, I think it changed part of the way through, right? Like,
No, I mean, go ahead. Let him say it, but G. Bush's initial point doesn't matter.
yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts, though, but here.
I think he went in the 5th round. He dropped from the 1st round because of talent. He dropped to the 5th round because of off the field.
There you go. I like that.
Does that make sense?
That's fine. Again, I'm not sure it matters that much.
No, I don't think it matters either.
And ultimately, I'll get to why. I want to hear what they have to say, but what she's laying out doesn't really matter.
Correct. And neither does this, but yeah, so strap in here.
I would say it's off the field. So we established that thing. I don't think he doesn't have a 5th round skill set.
No,
okay.
I agree. I agree.
Yes. Okay, so then we've established that.
Yeah.
So when they acquired Kenny Pickett, what did they trade for Kenny Pickett?
A 5th round pick, I believe.
Okay, 5th round pick?
That is correct.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. If everybody's sitting around telling me Shaduer Sanders, why you all excited about Shaduer Sanders? It's a 5th round pick. 5th round pick, G. Bush, 5th round pick. The value is 5th round. Gabriel went higher than him. Let me ask you a question. If they only traded a 5th round pick for Kenny Pickett, doesn't that mean his value is
a 5th round pick?
Thank you very much. That's you on through this process.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about money. Oh, the guaranteed money. They offered Flacco all this bread. They gave him money. They obviously, Kenny Pickett is getting money. McNuggets, I don't know. Can you look up how much Kenny Pickett is actually making?
Kenny Pickett this year, I will confirm in a second, but I believe it's $2 million.
Okay, I believe that. Now I know this is over a longer period of time, but I just think Shaduer just signed for $4.6 million, which is more money.
It's a 4-year deal.
It's a 4-year deal. Yeah. Spread it out.
Kenny Pickett this year will make $2.623 million.
Okay, let me ask you this question.
All right. Let me stop. That's way more than what Shaduer is going to make. He's 4.6 over 4 years,
Look, dude can't do math. Let's move on.
As we continue on the money line. Kenny Pickett, he had a 5th-year option, right?
Declined it.
Who declined that?
The Cleveland Browns.
Oh, I thought if they thought so much of him, they would have just gave him that bag of money, right?
Well, he got to show it.
Again, 5th-round value, declined your 20-something million because they didn't think you were worth that, and gave you a prove-it deal so that you could get your career back on track. My question is...
that was money he was already owed.
He was already owed.
Yeah.
He was already owed.
Yes.
So, for people that's saying that, oh, listen, his value is so much higher than the rest of them, he should be how is he a shoe-in when I could squint my eyes and say, why him? Put Dylan Gabriel in the first reps when you're talking about value. If you want to talk about what you've done and what you're worth, my thing is, and I just say it like this, I don't know why all of a sudden people act like Kenny Pickett doesn't have to earn his spot just as much as the rest of them.
Okay.
Like this thing, I'm going to push him to the top.
Fine now.
Listen, when you talk about it, I heard Bull one time say with Jason, because he's a veteran, Tyvis, the veteran talking point is takes care of the football, knows the game plan, doesn't put the ball in harm's way. Bull's like, whoa, hold on. I think his record is what? 10 and something? Like,
he's 15 and 14.
And how many picks to interceptions he done throw?
No, that's his interception touchdown. 15 touchdowns, 14 picks.
Yeah.
So is he really? Is he different than Flacco? Is he different than Jameis Winston?
To be fair,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Pittsburgh offense is
different.
atrocious.
To be fair, would you say Pittsburgh's offense is better than Cleveland's?
No, because the play caller in Cleveland is better than the play caller that's ever been in Pittsburgh for the past.
But Pittsburgh has had better talent.
He's better talent.
I give you that, but the play call is also something.
Yeah,
better
that's a
too.
fact for sure.
So I'm just giving you guys, I'm gonna just put it out there so we can all be even and honest about the situation. Because they did pass on Shaduer a few times, but they've also put some feelers in the air and said, "Yeah, Kenny Pickett, we're gonna bring you in, but you ain't that guy." Let me clear.
Yeah. Davis?
So eloquently put.
I mean,
we was ready today, McNuggets.
the way I look.
I got you, G. I got you, G. Stand up, bro.
We was ready.
And very accurately, and I mean, he's not the only one that feels this way. But world's fastest in the chat saying G. Bush has been off the wall on the whole Sanders thing. He sort of ate it up with it, like he's talking, like he thinks that he's going to win the job, and that folks are trying to sabotage him from winning it, which is not the first time I've heard that. But he is standing on that platform firmly.
Oh my God. Okay.
What does this have to do with what they're talking about?
So they took, I'll call it the scenic route to get to the right answer. It doesn't matter. None of these. They have 3 quarterbacks who they would love nothing more than one of these guys to be great. So when you view this in terms of depth chart, like the guy who takes the first snap, it doesn't matter. Like because if the Browns are smart, maybe they'll go a couple days with the same rotation, but ultimately they're going to rotate through in some form or fashion and mix these things up, because they've got to see what, as long as these guys do what they're supposed to do, regardless of who it is. Joe Flacco sort of married in that standpoint. It's, he can rep with the ones, but whether it's Pickett or Gabriel or Sanders, that is extraordinarily fluid. And I think you could see it where maybe a week they stay with the same rotation, but that's about as far as I can see them stick with the same rotation, because you've got to see if it's an open competition and you're desperate to see somebody seize this thing. Somebody's going to make a move, or have a better day, or start out faster, and you're going to want to see how they do in prime time. Now, when I initially saw this whole rotation thing, my immediate reaction was, my hope is the Browns are going to divide this team up in half and have multiple offenses going against multiple defenses, or something along those lines. And that was my initial thought when I saw this whole breaking up into the the groups, because
she mentions running 2 separate passing camps, basically.
right now. So if you're going to do that, you have to then split up your coaching staff to be able to handle this. You have to have, obviously, somebody calling the plays. Presumably Kevin Stefanski is going to call plays for one of them. And, somebody else could do it. And Tommy Reese is going to call plays for the other one. I mean, there's a world where they could hand it off to Bill Musgrave or something like that. And Kevin Stefanski could give himself the ability to sort of be a floater in that situation. But Jim Schwartz is going to have to be able to run one defense. Whoever he decides is going to have to run the other defense. And obviously they're going to film all of this so that, when they go inside, that everybody can watch everybody. Now, if you do this, and I hope they do this, you are then going to need to do a number of things. You're going to need to occasionally have the coaches swap.
Yeah.
Because you don't want Kevin Stefanski or, let's say it's Tommy Reese and Bill Musgrave. You don't want them exclusively coaching or getting, one quarterback getting all their coaching from one guy. Now, they have to be consistent in their terminology. They have to be consistent in the messaging. It has to all sound the same, and they have to be extremely well prepared in meetings and everything else, so that we're not getting cross coaching in the sense that you're going to have, Bill Musgrave tell, let's say, Dylan Gabriel one thing, and then the next day Tommy Reese is telling him something different. You have to be on the same page and very smart in terms of how you handle that. But you want to have every set of eyes be able to have this. This is on everybody, because, and this becomes more important for Jim Schwartz, because he's going to have to watch a whole lot of people. If he's running defense, they're having 2 sets of defense, even if he's got, what he's probably going to be with what amount to be the ones for the most part, the ones and the twos.
Yeah.
But you're still going to want to see, have him be able to spend time coaching up everybody else, or at least being able to sort of watch and then communicate to the other guys. But this isn't like, this isn't high school or lower level college where you have, varsity and JV coaches. You're going to have to be able to switch it up and make sure everybody's getting coached by everybody, because it's at some point you're going to have to bring this thing together in one group. So even if you didn't do that, you're still going to have to mix this up, because, again, you're not going to be able to run this rotation. And the other part about this is, if you do this, I'm very curious to see how this works out with Joe Flacco, because I just don't see him getting an insane amount of reps, especially early. It's not to say he won't rep at all, but everything for him is about building and maintaining strength to endure over the course of the season. My initial impression, and I'm fully prepared to be wrong on this, is that if the Browns don't feel great about the direction of this, Joe Flacco's reps are slowly going to increase over the course of camp and everything else, and especially
I think
training.
that's fair. Yeah.
But early, particularly in OTAs and minicamp, what does he need to do? Like, he's got to do what he's got to do in terms of individuals and some group work and all that stuff, but he doesn't need to go out there
and
rip it
throw
a ton of plays. Like, this is their opportunity to get eyes on as much as they can, to coach, to develop, to work with these guys as much as they can, to maximize their, especially in OTAs, especially up until we get to mid-June, where there's no pads, there is every incentive for the Browns to just fly through reps and get a ton of reps as much as possible. Even if it's on air, just get reps. But certainly when you have that extended roster, you have the ability to do multiple 7-on-7s or whatever it is at the same time. I mean, linemen, it's a little different. You don't want to put a ton of wear and tear, but ultimately you can still practice fast and practice effectively and do those things. Or you can do, two of the quarterbacks are at 7-on-7 and 2 are doing, the inside run stuff, or whatever their terminology for it is, 9-on-7, for example. But the other part of this is, I don't think the Browns are going to be married to any one thing. I would not be surprised if they sort of mix up how they want to do this thing over the course of this. But the idea that you're going to set a depth chart for how camp's going to go is not worth the paper it's written on. And Kevin Stefanski himself is sort of for reasons that go beyond just practicality. He doesn't want to sort of set a depth chart for this group because it sends a message that he doesn't want to send.
He's like, don't read anything into it in this.
Even though everybody does, and we've already seen it. But it doesn't matter. They just want to see reps, and they want to get as many as they can. They want to develop. And again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not where they are right now. It's where they're going to be. That's when it's going to start to matter, and we're going to start to see this thing take shape.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. So to me, that sort of rotation that's being laid out there is worth maybe the day, maybe a week tops before it completely gets turned on its head. And it might not even matter if they are, in fact, doing multiple groups at the same time. But they're going to have to rotate these guys. They're going to have them work with all kinds of different people because it does you no good at some point. Look, they bring in, they signed these 3 tryout receivers and they signed all the, they have got all these guys.
Yeah.
It's very useful to have them to be able to rep through and get a ton of reps in. That unless one of those guys is a serious threat to make the roster, their viability goes down pretty quickly and starts to limit what you can get out of these quarterbacks because like you're not playing against what are going to be real. I don't want to say real, but players are going to be on your team or players that are going to be able to really challenge the defense like these things. So they are super useful in terms of being able to get reps, but you've got to constantly put these guys in a situation where they're getting more realistic looks, both for their own development and so you can get a real eye on where they are. Like, if you're sitting there, if quarterback B is, not having a great time, but is doing reasonably well with the 2s, but quarterback C's might be better, but like it's hard to tell because he's playing with the 3s and 4s. Like you get this very convoluted thing. So I think none of that stuff matters right now.
Initially.
I think, the value in what's being laid out is entire structurally. Like what does practice look like? And if she's talking about multiple passing groups and she's talking about practicing fast and what that looks like and the structure of that and having 7-on-7s or a 7 quarterbacks with 7-on-7s and a 9-on-7 period over there. That is actually valuable. Now, how much is that of interest to readers or just people like me who actually do this and have to think about these things? I don't know, but like that is where this stuff matters. But to the overall point that like somebody is holding Shaduer Sanders back is insane. And obviously we heard this thing from Stephen A. Smith and this idea that like that the Browns are here to send a message. If Shaduer Sanders is as good as he could be, if he can prove to be a first-round pick, and you've said this too, they don't have time. They don't have time to humble him. He had the worst weekend of his life relatively speaking.
Yeah.
With the draft going in the 5th round, like they don't have time to sit there and like punish him further for that. They need him to absorb the offense as fast as they can. They need to build him up. They need to get him to a point where he can function and get better. That any time spent at this point about feeling bad for himself is wasted. They need him to do everything in their power to get him in the best possible situation possible because there is a real scenario where he could start week 1 and be the best option and help them win football games. Kevin Stefanski is not interested in playing like some sort of weird psychotherapist where he's trying to mess with this dude. Football teams don't. This isn't like a badly written movie. They don't have time for this crap. Yeah. They're trying to win games, and anything that's going to distract from that is stupid and a waste of time.
It's so ridiculous. Like nobody would draft the kid. Then the team that drafts him, they're trying to hold him down. I mean, what are we talking about here? That's ass backwards. It makes no sense. And then, but either way, to your point, I think that the structure stuff is interesting. I wrote about it too the day before and things I think I know a little bit, but more about speed. Stefanski mentioned in his presser about running, getting guys reps during break periods, running extra, to your point, extra 7-on-7s and stuff. But I think all of that is critical early. Mike, I wonder this, like how fast do you think they, like, in their minds, and we got to wrap this up here in a minute, but how fast did you think they want to have an idea of, like, do you think by the time they go in from OTAs, they want to have like a depth chart then? Like, so they know when they come back, they can kind of refocus their efforts?
If I had to guess, my best guess would be by the end of minicamp, which is in the
Yeah.
middle of June, when they are prepared to go for that 6-week break, that they're going to come back from ready for training camp. They will have some sort of idea of where this thing looks like. That's not set in stone, but they're going to want to have a pretty good feel of where they feel these guys are at a given point. They're obviously going to give them homework to do to try to get, better. So when they're back at camp, they can get a quick look and see if they've made progress on those things. But like when they get to training camp, they're going to have a pretty decent idea, or not long after, if it's a week, whatever, it's going to have to be quick because they don't have time. When we start getting prepared for the preseason, where those joint practices, like it's going to be the rubber hits the road at that point. And this is going to be true of every position. Like obviously quarterbacks can get the most focus, but like, where's my article on the running back rotation? Like these are all things that they've got to, they've got to figure out all these things. So yeah, I think at the end of minicamp, they're going to have a pretty good idea of where they are at that point in time. So when they come back to training camp, they're going to have an early indication of where those things are. Guys can still move around at that point. And then not long after that, if it's a week, if it's 2 weeks, they're going to that's probably where they're going to want to have it narrowed down to 3, if not 2 at that point, and then really start ramping this thing up as to figuring out who's the starter.
I think what you said about Flacco makes a ton of sense. Not much to do now, but if it's not going well, I think you see him start to take more of a role.
That may be we'll see. That may be the ultimate barometer of this thing. If we're in August and we're seeing more and more Joe Flacco, that's probably going to be a pretty good indication that they feel he's the best option.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, really good stuff tonight, Pete. Fantastic job. Any parting words before we get out of here for all of our listeners? Because Garage Beers is up next. I'm sure Mike's waiting in the wings.
Stay tuned. I mean, check out all things OBR and then stay tuned for Garage Beers. That's all I got.
Yeah, get locked in over at theobr.com. Read all of Pete's writing, all of our film breakdowns, Barry every morning. Make sure you're locked into all that. Be a part of the best Browns community in the world, the Orange and Brown Report, theobr.com. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. This has been a brand new edition of The React. Hit like and subscribe on your way out. Thanks for watching. Garage Beers is up now. We're out.